Hello and welcome to day 6 of the HATJ trial. I'm going to try and keep my energy up for this one, but there's about 500 pages left to go, and it's hard to keep your energy up during that. So, you know, it does get tedious at some points, but I don't want to skip a lot of stuff, even though it's not. Some stuff is more interesting than other stuff, but I don't want to skip certain things. You'll see why. Anyways, day 6 begins with HATJ still speaking. Keep in mind that she spoke almost all of day 5, and she's still speaking on day 6. Anyway, she's talking about the her factual ex trust and the UCCs, and she speaks about that the UCCs secure the property of the United States, the people of America, and their individual property. Here's the part that's good. You'll like this. Well, yeah, well, maybe you won't. Anyway, so when he mentioned that he had done numerous transactions and CDs, I went in to test it myself and just to see what had happened. So Heather saying that she attempted the TDA thing herself. And then communicate with all of our intelligence that we are in contact with during the cleanup to see what they were seeing on their end, which on their end, quote, they can see inside the Federal Reserve Bank, they can see inside the Bank for International Settlements, they can see inside any bank, really. So Heather is claiming that her intelligence contacts are omniscient. Anyways, well, that's going to come up later. You'll see. There we go. These are the tests that I personally ran using debt accounts. Now, Heather introduces evidence of herself attempting the TDA stuff. Now, Davidson is going to object here. Your Honor, I would point out to the court that we requested discovery in this case from the defendants, and none of this was provided to us. I'm just seeing this now for the first time. Just like the United States provides discovery, the defendants are supposed to provide discovery. I'm not really sure how they're relevant, so a discovery violation here by Heather. Well, Davidson complains about it. As we'll find out, the documents are bad for Heather. Even so why Heather filed, well, it just shows how confused Heather is, because she's filing documents that make her look bad. Anyways, Davidson complains, it's here saying that this has nothing to do with Bank of America, blah, blah, blah. Then she responds, it goes to my personal knowledge, and blah, blah, regarding my knowledge of ACH and the transactions. So, I think the judge allows for, well, the judge sustains the objection, but I think that the documents are allowed in, as you'll see. Thank you. There were other exhibits in the test case, blah, blah, blah. And then she files 8 different documents. Alright, so here's Heather digging her own grave. On July 5th, I went in and tested the ACH system so I could see what he was putting on. On July 5th, I did 2 with different institutions, and when I went to put in the routing information, I used my own name, my social security number. I knew what the Federal Reserve was for my particular one. When I went to do the routing number that corresponded with the Federal Reserve, it didn't work. It would say routing valid number not valid, and then I had to go and figure out which routing number went along with that bank. And a lot of okay, check this out. A lot of the Federal Reserve banks will have like a processing agreement with some of the other banks. So it was, in this particular case, it was Amalgamated Bank, a bank in Chicago, Amalgamated Bank. Okay, okay, this is for Heather's people. Okay, if you believe that Heather is the super expert, this should worry you, because, okay, Amalgamated Bank in Chicago is not a Federal Reserve bank. She was using the routing number of a random bank from Chicago. That bank does not have TDA accounts. That bank has nothing to do with TDA accounts. Why is Heather using the routing number? She's the irony here is that Randy did the same thing. He was using the routing number of a random bank, because of course using a Federal Reserve routing number will not work. So and I don't know how to say this more clearly. The routing number of a random bank is not going to access TDA accounts. If you're really trying to access TDA accounts, you would use a Federal Reserve Bank routing number for something having to do with TDAs. Amalgamated Bank has nothing to do with TDA accounts. So here, Heather says that she went in to go test CDs. And then she says that on July 17th, I received a letter. And of course, in this instance, they were all denied. So all of her CDs attempts were denied. She went in to go and test. I mean, she's throwing Randy under the bus here. On July 6th, I went in to go in and test more of them because he was starting to pay off other things and trying to do Amazon. I don't think this was mentioned in the case up to now, but Heather just admits that Randy was trying to buy stuff on Amazon with the TDA, which keep in mind, the prosecution is trying to paint Randy as greedy. So when Heather says that Randy was buying stuff on Amazon, it just makes Randy look bad, and she's helping the prosecution. Now check this out. The thing that became very clear on July 7th, I had received the phone call that there were a bunch of people who had watched this Harvey Dent video and they were having a radio show that night, so I listened to the radio show, and at that point I said, first off, the Treasury direct deposit accounts, as far as my knowledge, would not have been accessible through an ACH transfer processing system. However, it did look like it was somehow. This is not true. I've never heard Heather ever say that the TDA account should not be accessible by ACH. This is something she makes up this very day. So I would have to go look more into it. I told everyone to keep screenshots of every step so that I can see exactly what the issues were. Thank you, Heather, for providing the government with evidence. So then she mentions that she's heard about 300,000 people trying the TDA thing. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but, well, whatever. Now check this out. On July 7th, I spent time to go in and do one more to check out. Every single time that I went in to test, it never did it give the whole account number. It would do a star, and then only give the last 4 digits of the actual social security number. That struck me as odd, because if you've ever dealt with bank stuff, you know they hide the account numbers when you type them in. They do the same with passwords. It shows up as stars. It doesn't. That's a basic security thing, but Heather is so ignorant of basic security, computer security, that she doesn't know that. Which, again, look, that should be a red flag to people. If Heather doesn't know that they star out social security and account numbers for security purposes, then, you know, honestly, you shouldn't be listening to her. I think the reason they do that is so that someone that's looking at your screen can't copy the information. It's a basic identity theft thing. There's probably other reasons, but then. So then she talks about the process. It wouldn't let you proceed till the routing number. Entering the wrong account number would also reject it. But then correct routing number, but not the correct account number, it would say rejected. So she keeps talking about the her messing around with the system. She complains about the star thing again, even though that's then it would only show the last 4 digits of the routing number. Anyways, then she says there was legal language. I evaluated legal language just to be able to give feedback when we did meet in DC for the cleanup. So I think that this is a new version of why she was going to DC. She's now saying that she was going to DC for the cleanup. So now Davidson objects because this has nothing to do with anything. So here Heather says that based on what I had seen, I understood that there was a big problem. We were talking about this in the comments. Now, my interpretation of this is that she's saying that she said she discovered the big problem she's referring to is the ACH security issue that was described in day one. Now she's saying that she knew about it on July 7th, even though she learned about it during the trial. Now, Heather enters a second version of the factualized trust, which wasn't in evidence. So again, she's entering evidence that's against herself. You'll like this. They didn't write it correctly. This is Heather speaking. They put duly factualized, and it should have just been factualized trust. Actually, you know what? That brings up another point. There's no such thing as a factualized trust. If you type in factualized trust in Google, the only thing that shows up is Heather's stuff. There's no factualized trusts are not a thing in law. We can skip most of this, but I just want to say she says that she was in a farm in Houston working on another matter. Here Heather just buries herself. Check this out. On the second page, this is the MCO for the coach, as well as the documents which Mr. Cohen would need in the event there was a problem with the Fedwire, the sale itself. These particular documents would be needed for anti-money laundering laws, as well as any kind of other laws the Federal Reserve typically has used to exert pressure through their agents inside of law enforcement. So, I mean, she's basically admitting that the factualized trust documents she filed were intended to prevent, to block federal law enforcement from reversing the sale. This is another thing I want to bring up. She says that during that time, it took me quite a while to insert all of the underwriting into the factualized trust. She uses underwriting in a weird sense. Underwriting does not mean, I don't know what she means by underwriting. Underwriting just means that somebody is taking, in insurance it means, I think it basically means, if something bad happens, like if your house burns down, the underwriting is who is going to pay for the house, basically. So what she means in terms of underwriting here, God only knows. That's not a correct use of the phrase, of the word. She also says she had to pull all of the documents out of the archive in order to be able to do that. Now again, these haven't been made public other than the UCCs themselves, but nobody knows how to use them. That's a red flag there. The fact that nobody except Heather knows how to use these documents, and in fact, that's what the meetings in DC, as well as globally, hoping to have everything done in DC since there was all the embassies there. I think this appears to be like a fourth explanation of why she was going to DC. I guess she was trying to go to every single embassy in Washington, D.C. to solve, forget it. Check this out. You know, at this particular time, all of energetic signatures are already, the system and protocols in banking actually have moved to energetic signature, like I explained with the different technologies that the banks have been preparing since 2011 to have that switched over. This is not true. The banks do not use energetic signatures. She also says, traditionally, everything has been done by biometric. Biometric meaning your thumbprint, social security number. Social security number is not biometric. I like this paragraph here. Check this out. Everyone in banking, everyone in the government, they are all familiar at the highest levels with my security protocols that I have developed, as well as used with all of those entities since 2008, so they were familiar for them, and we could figure this out very quickly. Now, okay, fine, if you're one of Heather's people, Go to your local bank and ask them if they are familiar with Heather's security protocols that she developed. They won't know what the hell you're talking about. Heather says everyone in banking. There are almost 10 million people in the banking industry that work in the financial sector. It is impossible that everyone knows about this. In fact, Heather's own views only get a couple of thousand views, 10 or 100,000 views maximum. They do not know about this stuff, but Heather believes they do, or claims that they know. This is another thing to bring up. I needed to get over the UCC's, the underwriting for the actual factualized trust. That they would need to show proof of origin of funds, history of funds, title and ownership for the funds that Buddy Greg had already received. Okay, so the factualized trust is claiming to prove where the money came from, the history of the money, and the title and ownership of the money. Heather doesn't know where the money came from, so any document she's filing claiming saying where the money came from is false. It's fraudulent. Anyway, then she talks about her side of the arrest, what she heard during the arrest, which is irrelevant, so we can skip it. She does mention saying that she was Randall Bean's lawyer, and then she says it's lawyer, not attorney. That's not I've never heard that on the video, but anyways, this is her excuse, that she said that she was a lawyer and not an attorney, and you'll see. That comes up later. Heather mentions that there was a video, and she mentions that one of the FBI agents was very pregnant. I don't know why she mentions that, but it kind of shows how her train of thought is rambling. Here, the word shows up again here. I'm not putting in the attachments of the UCC underwriting. I mean, Heather appears to use the word to mean things written under, which is not. It's not the correct use of the word. Here, she mentions she received a phone call from her intelligence and banking contact. This is going to come up later. He told me that if I stopped what I was doing and made sure that the people stopped what they were doing, I was told if I went in and took action to stop all of this, there were, okay, wait, hold on. Davidson interrupts her and objects, relevance and no foundation. True, she says, it's her personal knowledge. Davidson objects, her personal knowledge has to have personal foundation, and she's laid no foundation to any of this. Someone told her. Who told her? And I want to now notice this, because it's very telling. Heather refuses to answer a question. She says the banks and the intel agents that I worked on in this particular matter. She doesn't say who. Your Honor, the judge asks her directly, what intelligence agents? I can enter the exhibit if you would like. The judge says, you can tell me. Heather says, the name. Judge says, the objection is, Heather says, I have the name of the agents. But again, she doesn't say that. What's the relevance of the testimony, blah, blah. So the judge sustains the objection. Notice that Heather is asked multiple times to say, name the agents, and she doesn't name them, which shows evasion on her part. Anyway, she says that if she stops it, physical harm, unless she stops it, physical harm or worse would come if I continued on, and if I continue to be particular, blah, blah, blah. Davidson objects, objection, someone told her that there would be a war, what people? The judge says the objection is hearsay. This is another important thing out here. Heather doesn't appear to understand what hearsay is, even though she went to law school. As the judge explains, hearsay is what someone told you. So Heather says that it's my understanding. So again, Heather just totally confused. Heather says it's based on personal knowledge. I don't Heather responds that to clear up my experience of why I believe that it was credible was because in 2011, during the mortgage cases that I spoke to you about yesterday, the Federal Reserve did take action, but didn't enter themselves into the particular case and ended up stealing $1 million of my father's money. There was no paper trail. Well, obviously, there's no paper trail. There's no paper trail of anything Heather mentions. But this brings up a separate point. I wanted to run a quick poll on in the comments to see if anybody would be interested in getting Heather's court records from Washington State. Basically, yeah, from Washington State. A reason for this, why I think I want to get these, is we don't know a lot about Heather from before 2012 when she announces OPPT. I believe that these documents should shed light on what happened in the UCC filings and everything. In particular, I can get this for you. Hold on. In particular, the one I want is HATJ versus U.S. National Bank Bank National Association. Ideally, the complaint she files 8/30/2010. What's important about this one is that it's 113 pages, and it's also the one of the first case that shows up chronologically that she filed. Notice that it's Heather HATJ versus them. So she filed this case, and she also filed the complaint. But the thing is, we have to pay money to buy these documents, so I'm wondering if people would be interested in setting up donations to get these documents. If people aren't interested, then no point. But I think something interesting may be to sort of shed light on how Heather got to the point where, to the point where she's in federal jail, because she goes from prosecutor to jail in just a matter of years. So a lot of one of the mysteries is how Heather got to this point. I have my suspicions. Either I believe, well, what I want to know is whether Miller was involved with Heather at this point. That's a separate thing. Back to the transcripts. Heather says, at this point, I have no information that they've returned the funds. We've already discussed that. The money doesn't have to be returned until after the guilty verdict and the forfeiture. So why Heather is mentioning this? Well, we know why she's mentioning it, because she doesn't understand how the law works. She says she resent the declaration of lawful sale. She can't declare that it was a lawful sale. She doesn't know. Well, it wasn't a lawful sale, so... anyways, Heather says that at no point was there any intent to conspire to hide money or have money stolen or launder. No fraud at all. My intent was to stop crimes from happening. We were trying to set up a situation where we would be able to put the Federal Reserve Bank and all the foreign actors that use it, to put them into a situation where the foreign actors... we would have a clear line from the foreign actors to the foreign agents, how our systems in America are used for their benefits. Also to be able to identify the foreign agents embedded as officials and employees of the U.S. government. Oh my God. We were able to discover that Mr. Still had been ordered by the Federal Reserve Bank, and it was just a matter of trying to get Mr. Still to get me involved in this case somehow, some way. So, I mean, Heather is claiming that she got herself involved in the case intentionally, which is not true. At that point, we were trying to coordinate between the different military agencies. Heather is claiming that she was working with military intelligence and Crown. Also because the Federal Reserve Bank has their own police force. Then Heather claims, yesterday the FBI deputy director resigned in a large part due to this case, which Obviously, that's not true, and Davidson objects. Relevance has no basis in fact. Heather claims that she was trying to create a situation where she would be able to lay an evidentiary trail for law enforcement, corruption, collusion, and ignorance that resulted in crimes against not just the American people, but also through humanity. So, again, Randy getting arrested was a crime against humanity. This is an interesting comment from Heather. There was one thing on July 17th when I made my inquiry to figure out where the RV was. Randy was in jail July 17th, so Heather and Val and Alex were trying to get the RV. Basically, screw Randy, we want the RV. And she says she flew on an emergency flight to Washington because the same threats against Mr. Bean were the people that were doing threats in D.C. On the 20th, she went to the Treasury and White House to be able to speak with everybody about what had gone on. Obviously, she didn't speak with anyone that she got kicked out. Because she doesn't have any damn contacts there. Anyways, they were staying at a hostel. Then Val and Alex decide they want to stay in a hotel. I mean, the nerve of these people. This is an interesting little detail. I was the one that paid for the particular rooms using the credit card I had opened up to be able to do different testing. There was an unanswered question about how Heather was able to pay for all this stuff and fly to Washington D.C. if she was broke. So here we have the answer. She took out a credit card to pay for all these expenses. On July 20th, when I went to the White House, as soon as I approached, Secret Service came out and locked down the whole street. She says she was on the phone with a particular agent that works in the cleanups as well as the banking. They take a bathroom break here. But in the moment they speak about the forfeiture of the motorhome. I think we've already discussed that. Basically, if he's found guilty, he has to give up the motorhome. It's not, they don't take it before the guilty verdict, but I think we've already talked about it. Anyways, Davidson gets her chance to cross-examine Tucci, and this is great stuff here. Ms. Tucci, you said that your family was in construction, Tucci and Sons Inc., yes, so they built roads and other big things in the Northwest. That is one of their business. And so if you do, I looked and researched it a little bit. I saw where they own asphalt companies, but I didn't see anywhere where they own banks. I looked this up myself, and Davidson was doing her homework while Heather was testifying. This is true. Heather said that her family owns a bank. They don't own a bank. What bank do they own? Asked Davidson. Heather responds, that would be, I'm guessing this is pronounced Puget Sound. Heather's family does not own Puget Sound Bank. Look it up yourself. She says it would be Bill Hamilton and Michael A. Tucci are the names of the owners of that bank. I haven't found anything showing Bill Hamilton owns the bank or that Michael Tucci owns the bank. On the actual Tucci and Sons website, so I mean, why? Well, basically, Heather is lying here. Well, another option is that maybe they own some stock in the company, but as in directly owning majority ownership, that's not true. They talk about the company, blah, blah, blah. He went to law school. It's not easy to get into law school. In fact, Gonzaga is a very well-respected law school, and it's hard to get into, isn't it? You have to be smart. So here the prosecutor, because Heather's entire excuse is that she's too stupid to have pulled off the scam, but the prosecutor uses the fact that she was smart enough to get into law school to show that that's nonsense. Heather apparently realizes this and claims that her grades were low in undergrad, so, quote, they let her in because she was in volleyball, and that's what she claims. And then says that she graduated bar exam, state prosecutor, blah blah. Says that worked for the prosecutor's office. Yes, yes. And you know the law applies to everyone, don't you? And you've seen this Black's Law dictionary. I am familiar with Black's Law. It used to be a joke book, and then it got turned into a dictionary. It was never a joke book. That's how they're talking about. Okay, and so you know that there is absolutely no difference between the definition of attorney and lawyer. That's correct. Actually, in Bouvier's, so entry shifts. Well, actually, I use Bouvier's. Okay, so lawyer asks the same question again. Do you know there's no difference between attorney and lawyer? Actually, I know there's a difference based on my experience with DOJ. So her excuse is that someone in the DOJ told her that there's a difference. Well, I think this comes up later. Anyways, so you're the only one that knows the difference between attorney and lawyer. Actually, no, there was the United Nations did a judicial corruption investigation. I believe there was no such investigation. I've tried to find it. It doesn't exist. I wasn't part of it. I did receive the information during the mortgage investigations that were run in Pierce County, Washington. This was the information from federal judges and Department of Justice attorneys that I was working with at the time. Now, keep in mind, Pierce County is where Heather's first lawsuits show up in 2010. So I believe that's what Heather is referring to, and that those court files would shed light on what actually was happening. Anyways, and the prosecutor asks, who were they? Who were the Department of Justice attorneys you were working with at the time? At that time, it was retired DOJ Brenda Steele. Brenda Steele did not work for the Department of Justice. I've tried to find it. No such thing. And what time was that? It would have been around March 2011. 2011, retired Brenda Steele, and then they spell it out. So this is how we know that the name is correct. There is no record of Brenda Steele. She told you there was a difference. No, she was talking about the bar, the association of the history of it, and this is what raised red flags for me. She was talking about the bar, the association, and the history of it. This, to me, makes me believe that she's talking about the Brenda Steele that is apparently a sovereign citizen. She had been with the DOJ for 30-some years. Not true. Then retired and went to the Senate. I can't recall the name of the senator. Obviously, because it's made up. She's also in the Geneva Trade Platforms, or the Geneva Trading Groups. I don't think that's a real thing. She was a ghostwriter for the Supreme Court of the United States. Also made up. Anyway, check this out. She explained it to me that around 1965, they were explaining constitutional law to all their attorneys. Most of the attorneys were not allowed to hold a position because they would have to register under the Foreign Agent Registration Act in 1930. Now, this is a sovereign citizen theory that basically says that lawyers work for the British government, and therefore they're foreign agents, which makes me believe that, yes, the Brenda Steele Heather is referring to is the sovereign citizen Brenda Steele. So this again, this makes me this coincides with the January 2011 date that Heather essentially got sucked into sovereign citizen ideology. And then the United Nations report that came out regarding judicial corruption in the United States, I believe she's making that report up. I can't find it. Okay, so now the lawyer gets into the license, and you know, it's a crime to hold yourself up as a lawyer if you're not licensed to practice law. Yeah, which is what Heather said. It's also illegal to do any sort of legal documents, isn't it, as an attorney? Yes. So for Heather to have been writing documents and stuff was all illegal. I was writing documents for a factualized trust. I was the lawyer for the factualized trust and its trustee, not for individual persons. Little problem, Randy is an individual person. She claims she never jumped in as a lawyer in any instance. Well, the video contradicts her. Davidson makes that point in Exhibit 94. Exhibit 94 in this video. We heard multiple times is that you held yourself out as an attorney. Actually, it was a lawyer. Keep it. Okay. Page 68. Actually, I held myself out as a lawyer. Literally, the previous sentence. I never jumped in as a lawyer in any instance. Actually, it was a lawyer. But imagine that. Now this is good. This is good. You were asked right before you graduated from law school to participate in the cleanup. Who asked you? She dodged this question. They used other words that I can't recall that called it cleanup. She asked him again, who asked you? There's another dodge. You said they asked me, who asked you to participate? Another dodge here. It was a representative that works with all of the different cleanup parts, such as the space programs, the militaries, U.S. Navy, specifically U.S. Army. U.S. Navy, specifically U.S. Army. And then throughout my career, blah, blah, blah. By the way, this is all a dodge. She doesn't mention who the guy. So, who was the individual that asked you? What was his name? His name. Another dodge at law school or throughout the at law school. At law school. Okay, so she's Davidson has been asking like 8 times, and Heather avoids it every single time. They didn't identify themselves at that time. It was only later I found out who that was. Okay, who was it? It was a Commander Thorak. Now, we've already talked about Commander Thorak on the channel. Why did they pick you as a third-year law school student? What was special about you? It had to do with my personality and my connections that I had growing up and her belief system. Okay, and so you mentioned you were talking about your time in Italy, and you knew that you didn't know Italian, and you learned it when you got over there, and you said that you were asked to help with financing of the World Trade Center in Sicily. It looks like Davidson didn't look this up, but there is no World Trade Center in Sicily. That's another lie by Heather. Who specifically asked you? Heather says, I don't recall his name. A local politician. Oh my god. You would think that if you were working for someone, you would remember that. She says about Italy, the Japanese would send the girls over to have a year of experience before they got married. This is another interesting dodge here. Okay, so you were working for, who were you working for at that time? I wasn't working for anyone. I was prepping for the particular job I would end up having to do for the next 20 years. Now, this to me sounds like it looks like the husband was the one doing everything, was the one working, and she was just hanging out in Italy. That's what that sounds like to me. The prosecutor asked, what was it? How did the politician find you? Heather doesn't answer that question. You grew up around people who had multinational corporations, and because you grew up around people that own multinational corporations, you're an expert in multicultural multinational corporations. I never testified that I was an expert. Yes. Okay, and you said that prosecutors and defense attorneys are paid by the same entity. That's just not true. Heather disagrees and says that it is true. As a line prosecutor, someone asked you to research where all the money came from? No. So, see, she's just investigating these things on herself, by herself. You said you worked in human capital. What does that even mean? The answer is something about cattle. Treasury deposit accounts. Why do you know about them? If no one knows about them, why are you the only one that knows about them? I'm not the only one. At your family's company, do they have a director of human capital? She says, Ms. Tucci and Sons isn't multinational. Here, this is kind of cringy. The prosecutor starts to make fun of her. You like to talk and you're a good talker and you expect people just to believe everything you say, don't you? No. Yeah, you'll like this. Specifically, you said the Swiss company hypothecate doesn't mean what you said it does in the test. If you look at Black's Law Dictionary, you use a lot of terms that don't mean what did he say, what is the question. I'm saying hypothecate doesn't mean what you said it did in that sentence. That you're a Swiss shell company hypothecate monetary instrument. As it says, actually, I never said that. I'm gonna skip this part because it's boring. Okay, you said that it became illegal to do these hypothecate contracts. No, that's not what I said. Heather explains what she believes hypothecation means. Prosecutor says that's not what the definition of hypothecate says in the dictionary. Heather says in banking we don't use Black's Law Dictionary. It's UCC as well as International Commercial Codes. Now, another side note here. I believe that where Heather got this fake definition of hypothecate is from Winston Shroud, because Winston Shroud also uses hypothecation in this same incorrect sense. So that would be my theory. And check this out. Which bank did you work at? I worked with all the different banks. That's a very Sarah Palin moment there. You know, if you remember when Sarah Palin is asked which newspaper she reads, I read all the newspaper. All the newspaper. Prosecutor asks which one, name me one. Heather says, I never was employed by a bank, but I worked with all the banks. I was employed with different companies, such as Treasury Finance AG. There is no Treasury Finance AG until I left them. That was the last one I worked with. Lone Stone Capital was another. Lone Stone Capital doesn't exist. So when asked for companies that Heather worked with, she mentions two fake companies. Treasury AG Finance, where is that? Treasury Finance AG, that was in Switzerland. Not true. I mean, seriously, try and find Treasury AG in Switzerland, guys. If you're on Team Heather, find Treasury Finance AG, the company that Heather says she worked for. It doesn't exist. Okay, she's asked who are the owners of the company. Those are done by bearer bonds. So whoever holds them, you never know. I don't. All you know is the director. I mean, this is not true. This is not true, people. Okay, so did you know who the director was of this? Yes, for both Treasury AG as well as Lone Stone Capital, those were Christoph Ray, who's the Swiss authority, who is also the owner, co-founder of Leo Trade. Okay, I can't find a Christoph Ray in Switzerland. Definitely not a Christoph Ray that works for either Treasury or a Lone Stone Capital. Also, I don't think I was able to find a Leo Trade, but this is phonetic spelling, so that might be spelled incorrectly. Anyways, the prosecutor asked her about the judges that she says were attacked by the mafia. Which judge? I don't remember the judges' names. Heather does not remember any damn names, does she? I have different intelligence contacts, mainly the last two for the last, I would say, 5 years. Worked with different jobs with Carl Langenstein is one. Well, we've talked about Carl Langenstein. He's an ex-felon, currently a fugitive in Panama. He was trader for Switzerland. He was the trader for the country of Switzerland. Okay, that is not true, period. And so that is your intelligence contact. The other one is Jonathan B. Betts. He is the financial trader for the White House. The financial trader for the White House. He does the trading for the White House. Davidson is smart enough to know that there is no trader for the White House. And she says that I've met him, has been that he is a trader for the White House, which hasn't exactly been known, but I've made it public over the last 2 years. Little diversion here. Jonathan D. Betts has his whole CV up on Bloomberg. And this has to be the Jonathan D. Betts because I can't find any other Jonathan D. Betts. Okay, let's go through his whole CV here. He was the executive vice president of MDI Entertainment from October 13, 2000 to 2001. MDI Entertainment is a lottery company. Then he was sales manager for medical electronics. Then he was chairman of the board of TechniPower since 2004. He is still the chairman of the board for TechniPower LLC, which is an electronics company. And it says that he has a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Boston University. So this guy has never worked for the government, according to his own CV. And he isn't even he doesn't even have any financial training whatsoever. He's an electrical engineer. So, all right. So the options here are limited. Either Heather is lying about speaking to Jonathan D. Betts, or Jonathan D. Betts is lying to her, or somebody is pretending to be a Jonathan D. Betts. Your guess is feel free to guess, figure out what is going on here. She says that Jonathan is under Secret Service protection since 2016. Well, yes. You testified your kids' birth certificates were registered with the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. No, that's not what I said. Heather pulls out the record, and that you testified right here, and that they explained to you they sent it to the IMF. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I'm reading from your own testimony. The prosecutor reads Heather's own testimony, and Heather doesn't believe that. Yes, it would eventually end up to the IMF. That's simply not true. Is it not? It's not. Yeah, birth certificates are not sent to the IMF, period. The prosecutor asked about the UCC. The UCC is nothing but a bunch of proposed laws that aren't even law unless the state adopts them. There is no UCC code. There is UCC. The UCC is just proposed codes. Heather says the UCC is the law of the land. There is no borders with that. The prosecutor correctly points out that's simply not true. You keep talking about there's no UCC registry. There's no such thing as a UCC registry. Heather says you can. So yes, Heather says, yes, there are uniform commercial registries. I know in Pierce County they have an office. In Washington, D.C. they have an office. Here's how we know Heather is lying about this. The UCC filings she filed were not filed at the Washington, D.C. UCC registry. They were filed at the Recorder of Deeds office. One possibility is that Charles Lee Miller lied to her and told her that he filed them at the UCC registry and actually filed them at the Recorder of Deeds office. But, well, God, who knows? Anyways, yeah, the prosecutor is on the ball here. She says, all of these documents that you keep referencing are actually filed at the Recorder of Deeds, aren't they? Yes, just like da-da-da. So, the Recorder of Deeds for the Uniform Commercial Registry. That's not true, which is nonsense. And the prosecutor points out there is no UCC registry. And Heather says, yes, there is. You can record anything you want to at the Recorder of Deeds. Can't you? There are other departments at the Recorder of Deeds, but UCC is one of them. Heather's standby counsel finally has enough and objects that they're arguing issues of law instead of asking questions. The prosecutor asks her what Patera is, basically making fun of her again. These documents are basically just gobbledygook. No, they're not. Okay, I'll read from one of the contracts. Then they object to the documents. Let's keep it. You run a website where you help people create fake legal documents. Don't you know I've tracked these fraud scheme? Haven't you? The ACH fraud scheme that you participated in, and you published that on the website everywhere it's worked, and it hasn't worked. Actually, I didn't participate in a fraud. So you were the Pied Piper for another fraud scheme. What is won people's public trust? It wasn't a fraud. It was part of the cleanup. And you know people that followed you in that fraud have been prosecuted for fraud, don't you? It wasn't a fraud, and I wasn't aware of that. Bull BS. She knows about people that have been prosecuted. Okay, you operate a blog and a YouTube channel. Yes, I opened a YouTube channel for a particular interview. And for an interview I did with a gentleman named Sacha Stone. If you don't know who that is, just some hippie, drugged out. Anyways, and you've got one video that's got almost 60,000 views. She blames her son for the videos. Not gonna say his name. You actually make money off your supporters, don't you know? Everything I've done, Heather denies getting donations. He says that she funded herself. Okay, and so your supporters, you begged for money to buy an RV to travel the world to spread your message, the Opal Tour. I wasn't involved in the Opal Tour. That's kind of true. Heather blames Lisa Harrison. She came to Morocco with a bunch of other people. So your supporters paid for you to move to Morocco, didn't they? No, and I don't have support. This is kind of sad because I guess a prosecutor didn't know that. You know, the donations were for other people to move to Morocco. Heather was already in Morocco, and Heather explains this. My husband and I actually paid for, like I said, everything is funded by myself and my husband. He takes care of housing and whatnot. Yeah, I like that. I like these two sentences. Everything is funded by myself and my husband. He takes care of housing. So everything's funded by her husband, not by Heather. So, I mean, poor guy. Anyways. The only time that there was help, they helped out with commissary. These are the donations that they're asking for. And by the way, commissary isn't even that expensive. If Heather is so rich, why can't she pay for commissary herself? Quote, even now they're helping out with rent, but that doesn't accompany me, and I've never put out the call for that. I believe the rent she's talking about is Terran Cognito, or Bill, who has been living off donations for a couple of years now. This might maybe be my partially. I suspect that the prosecutor here did some research on either Quadloose or Fogbo and saw that there were references to OPPT taking donations. You know, the people getting donations are other people. Heather generally doesn't ask for donations, but in general, you know, when we say OPPT is asking for a donation, we mean the whole group and people associated with. You didn't ask for money to help start a commune in Morocco. No, that was again Lisa Harrison, Danny McKinney. Her family are actually in the royal family in the United Kingdom. That's not true. So yeah, she blames Lisa Harrison. But yeah, you know, when we say that OPP was asking for a donation, we don't mean specifically Heather. I didn't have anything to do with Opal Tour. You believe, based on your testimony, that everyone has a secret account. We can skip that. Yes and no. Sean O'Malley has never heard of the secret trade accounts. Yeah, it's kind of like the FBI saying trade platforms don't exist. I've never heard the FBI say that trade platforms. I've never heard the FBI say that trade platforms don't exist. So this is how they're making stuff up. That's why I loved having O'Malley on the stand, just for him to state whatever statements he wants to say. So you say you were offered secret money, but you refused it. I was offered in order to shut down. So you turned it down. You turned down your $1 billion. Heather says, "I've always turned it down." Who offered it you this last time? This last time it was communicated through Carl Langstein. Langstein is a fraud and a fugitive, so he can't offer anything. So you said you were going to reject your secret money, blah blah. That's not what I said in the court hearing. He was making fun of me and saying thank you so much for giving yours, so that all blah blah. So Heather is at least aware that the judge and everyone else is making fun of her. They talk about the Harvey Dent video. Then prosecutor asks, you testified that you were trained at the highest levels of banking, trade, finance, and collections, but you don't know anything about ACH transactions, not collections, So you have all this banking experience and you don't know, and you didn't recognize that Harvey Dent video as ACH fraud. Heather says, I don't work at that level of banking. And so, in the Harvey Dent video, the ACH transaction, he specifically says it has to be an ACH transaction and that it only works because of the 2-day float of the ACH system. I don't remember that part. In fact, it wasn't. No, I understand you do know that the only reason the fraud works is because of 2-day float. First of all, it's not a float. It's not a fraud. Secondly, I'm not aware of the 2-day float until we were here in court. Heather, the super expert in finance and everything, didn't know that there was a 2-day period for ACH to clear. An interesting little admission here by Heather. Mr. Bean was the only one that I know that successfully went in to purchase. Now this part is funny. You also testified that you don't have any debt, but your exhibits that you proposed, Government Exhibit 11, shows a Macy's balance of over $5,000. Alright, so check this out. Early in the trial, Heather testifies that she doesn't have any debt, but then on day 6, she submits her own paperwork showing that she was in debt. Heather says, those aren't mine and don't have any debts. It says, right, I don't have any debts or accounts. That Macy's accounts actually belongs to James G. Tucci, which is my father. I used my sister and my dad's account and would take full responsibility. Now, keep in mind here, Heather is 47 years old. Why is her dad still paying for her expenses? This is also another interesting comment here. I needed to know how it all worked, and I didn't have time to set up accounts for different places for myself. They had pre-existing, and I used his because of the $1 million that was stolen in collusion with Federal Reserve Bank and everything else. Again, look, Heather, 47 years old, doesn't have her own bank account. Now, I'm going to suggest here that the reason for that is that Heather, I'm suspecting that her family knows that Heather is crazy, and they're basically taking care of her, like a mental illness thing. Anyways, and your Costco card has got your name right here. That's my sister's Costco card. So, I mean, she's living off of her sister. It's ridiculous. Lloyd objects. The Costco card ending in 4569, it clearly has your name on it, and it has a balance of $18,493. So, I mean, she has racked up 20 grand on her sister's Costco account. Did you tell your sister you were going to use the routing number of the Federal Reserve Bank, My family did not know. Look, she's messing with her sister's Costco account and not telling her about it, which is, I mean, that's just super, I mean, that's just fraud, basically. And I explained to them that I was going to test something out, and that I would be fully responsible if there were any issues. So, yeah, you were fully responsible. There were issues, and now you're in jail. So they were willing to assist. He's in the process right now in court getting his $1 million back with it. There's no Michael Tucci case. So Heather here saying that he's in court trying to get his $1 million back. I mean, that's not true. And if you want to check it out yourself, I just did. Well, give me a second. Anyways, in fact, my sister was the first one that kind of had to walk me through how to even access the online accounts. I mean, again, super expert in banking, and her sister has to explain to her how it works. My sister and father did not know that. They did not know that it was regarding the social security numbers or TDA accounts. They didn't know any of that. So, I mean, she's lying to her own family there, Jesus. Now Heather claims I had so much on my plate because I had the threat against POTUS, assassination attempt against POTUS that I was working to prevent. So she was working to prevent Trump from being assassinated. You admit it was Mr. Bean's idea to purchase the CDs. All I know is that I spoke with Mr. Bean. They were already purchased. Heather blames Harvey Dent for the CD idea. So you admit that the whole scheme worked because the CD was bought and cashed immediately. There was no fraud, no attempt there was no fraud, no intent to defraud. You make it sound like it's something illegal. Of course it's illegal. Okay, so this buying the CD and cashing it out immediately the next morning, that's not the work of a delusional man. Heather kind of make a legitimate point here. He says that they got the idea from USAA to sell the CD. Then she blames the Federal Reserve, blah, blah, blah. Then she might have misspoken because she was busy. I had DC and the banking stuff. I had DC and the threat against the president, but now I had an escalating situation with Mr. Bean. I couldn't handle another thing. We're going back and forth here. He had the cash, which I already knew the origin of funds and history of funds for the cash. That's not true. She doesn't know that where the funds came from. They talk about the video. First, they recorded with my direction, and then they stopped the video because I started to roll cigarettes. I smoke pipe tobacco and roll my own cigarettes. Number one, it's cheaper so that I can put more money towards the activities that I do for the cleanup. I mean, the tobacco is not that expensive, but she's a millionaire. Why is she saving money on tobacco? And the other thing here is, if you see the video, it doesn't look like tobacco, and Heather doesn't speak like somebody that's sober. Here we have the only human moment by Heather in the trial, because I didn't want to be recorded. I don't like video, and really it's just a matter of I don't like looking at myself, okay? So, self-esteem issues. Here we go. You're all about transparency. Okay, so why didn't you tell them the truth? Why didn't you tell them that the money came from the Federal Reserve? Throughout the video, you call it the originating bank. You say in that originating bank. You don't say it's a secret account from the Federal Reserve. I'm talking about the conference call. So yeah, here they're showing that the reason Heather was avoiding calling it the Federal Reserve Bank was because she knew that that wasn't good. Then I think they take another break. This is an important thing because Heather was given copies of the jury questionnaires, but she never returns them. I don't remember if she ever returned them, but this is kind of a big deal because the jury questionnaires can contain private information about the jury. My suspicion is that Heather gave it to Beezy or one of her guys so they could harass the jury. So you actually cite the Federal Reserve website in one of your emails. Yes. Are you familiar with the website? I'm familiar, but not with their website. And you know that all over the website it says that this TDA scheme is a fraud. Actually, I hadn't seen any of the notices until you had presented it into evidence. Heather is actually pretending that she didn't know, that she didn't see any of the warnings about the TDA thing being a fraud. And so if you search on Google TDA accounts, it says it's a fraud. I don't know. Okay, but everywhere on the internet, like Snopes and Wikipedia, says they don't exist. They're all lying, and you're the only one that has the truth. Heather responds, they also said the FBI and Congress serve the people, and we're finding out that's different. That's your opinion. It's what's on the internet. She asks, so when Mr. O'Malley testified that there were no secret accounts out of the Federal Reserve, he was lying. It says, I know there are accounts that the people in America don't know exist. Then she asked why she didn't tell USAA about the accounts. There we go. They're almost ending. He said during I asked you who recruited you to do the cleanup. You said Commander Thorax. There are space programs. I don't know if you call this. Trump in, I think it was October, reinitiated the Space Council. These are programs that our military has been writing for a long time. Okay, and I asked you, you said it was Commander Thorax. No, was he in the Navy? No, it's part of the space programs. Part of the space programs. However, those contacts would put them in different military. Let me interrupt. The question was about Commander Thorax. Right. He works with those militaries as well. Okay, and do you play video games? No. Are you familiar? There's a Commander Thorax with the World of Warcraft. It's actually Thorax. Now, Thorax, no, I'm not familiar with. I could ask my kids if you like, but I wouldn't be able to answer that for a moment. And Davidson ends with that. Bean gets this chance to interview Heather, and it just gets insane. I've heard you mention foreign actors on several occasions. Would you please clarify who that might be? So foreign actors, the ones I've worked with, when I say foreign actors, is anyone outside the United States. So you have Xi, President of China. Heather claims you have worked with the President of China. I mean, I've never seen a picture of her with President Xi, so that's I'm going to call that a lie. I worked with General Wang, Wang, and I worked with, that would be one. She also claimed to be, I've worked with General Wang. Then you have Putin and every of the high-level cabinet officials. She's not only claiming to have worked with Putin, but also with his cabinet. Then she says in Italy it was Machiavelli, the Italian version of Jeff Sessions. It wasn't him, but it was black nobility families that are in Florence. He also claims Bill Gates Sr., although he lives in Seattle, is a part of those foreign actors, and then she also mentions the Rothschilds. Mainly in this particular case, China and Russia were involved because China has the most to do regarding Treasury direct deposit accounts. Then they talk about the warrant here. NCIC. You said there was a warrant out of Jasper, Colorado. That's going to come up later. What made me concerned with what was actually involved with getting you taken, Jasper, Colorado, doesn't exist. No, they address this later. It doesn't matter here. You mentioned, you had mentioned an imminent threat on my life. Can you elaborate on that? I was contacted by an agent I worked with for years, and then I also contacted Jonathan Betts. I didn't get contact from him. They work with CIA, Mossad, Chinese intelligence. Carl Langenstein is the other one that I worked with. He's actually, okay, this is an amazing lie. He's actually the director of finance for the state-owned Sinotech, which is basically, it's the only company and its two subsidiaries that can actually move money in and out of China. Now, there's three lies in one sentence here. He's actually, okay, number one, Sinotech is not state-owned. Carl Langenstein is not the director of finance for Sinotech, and it's not the only company that can move money in and out of China. So 3 lies in one sentence. Davidson finally objects and says that it's irrelevant. The judge is clearly shocked here. Check this out. You said something about Bill Gates, and I don't know how that has to do with, because they were all involved in making sure he gets arrested. Your testimony is that Bill Gates in Seattle was involved in Mr. Bean getting arrested. They were all of the actors. That's based on your own personal knowledge, yes. The judge says go ahead. It just continues getting worse. You remember a phone call between you and I after my arrest in which you explained, because of my actions, that I had exposed a lot of the deep state and the secret space program, and had explained, upset a lot of people. How buying an RV exposes the secret space program? I mean, that makes no sense. Sorry. And Randy apparently doesn't even understand it himself. How would that have helped expose the secret space program? A lot of people are working in different offices. Oh, wow. Thank you. And the space program is all wrapped up, involved in that. As well as the deep state, is that people use deep state, shadow government, all that. Davidson finally has enough. Objection, Your Honor. Relevance to the deep state and shadow government. Go ahead with your next question. Defined, rebutted. She explained that the findings have never been rebutted. Anyways. What is the goal of the universal cleanup? The ultimate goal of the ultimate cleanup is essentially that, quote, a cleanup. So she tries to explain the cleanup, which doesn't actually explain anything. And then something about terrorism. Let's just skip all this. This gets boring. But then she talks about the secret indictments. Heather gets another chance to speak. I have worked on a lot of frauds. Okay, Haiti Benghazi, the Bureau of Land Management, through the Bundy case. I was in China in December of 2008, and I was there to work up on cleaning the corruption in Hong Kong with General Wang. I mean, imagine that. Heather mentions she was trying to find the RV to know where it was so that the proper steps to be taken to secure it. So again, Randy in jail and Heather is trying to get the luxury RV. It really shows the priorities here. Davidson gets to interview her again. And you say you have compassion for all the people involved in this case, all the law enforcement and prosecutors. You have compassion for all of us, but that's not true. You actually published all of Special Agent Parker Still and his family and his parents, all that information on the web, didn't you? I didn't know about Mr. Parker's family or his parents as far as the discovery which he had presented in Washington, D.C. Yes, I made sure that particular information was public in our archives, and his hometown and his parents and where he worked and his family. Answer, I didn't know there was. I did not see the information. No, talking about published information on the web. I didn't know about published information on the web. So Heather is denying knowing about Parker Still's family being harassed by her followers, which I don't believe. I mean, I can't prove it, but yeah, but she was clearly involved in. I mean, Jesus Christ, they even harassed his parents, and they even show. I mean, it's a miracle more people didn't get arrested. Anyways, Heather stops and they call Alcala, and this is one of the jail calls. Anyways, Alcala is called to speak about a phone call. On this one, it says Dwayne Russell Ford. Basically, Ford called to verify check. and then the bank told him that the check was bad, that it was, the call was on the 7th and the 8th. So as early as the 7th, Randy knew that the checks were bad, which is very bad for Randy, because he was trying to buy in on the 10th with a bad check. Next up, they call the Knox County Sheriff's Department guy, and he works with the detention facility. You'll see why they call him. It's actually kind of interesting. Well, it's not that interesting, but I think it's interesting. I'd like to show you. They're talking about Randy's booking, and they entered John Doe. If we have a person who will not tell us who they are, we mark them as John Doe until we find out through fingerprinting. Is that what happened here? Yes. So Randy's booking was delayed because he never told them his real name. So they had to identify him by fingerprint. They had to send his fingerprints to the FBI and TBI. Does that delay the processing time? Yes, it does. So I'm not sure why Davidson decides to do this, but basically this explains all the delays in the process. Anyways, they get into the warrant from South Carolina just to address Heather's nonsense about it. This is a fax copy of the warrant from South Carolina showing blah blah. Can you explain what a fugitive from justice warrant is? Sure, anytime a subject is wanted from a state outside the state of Tennessee, the state will enter the warrant into NCIC. I have two questions. They talk about the consent to the FOIA. So now they're going to read the report. Quote, the defendant is a fugitive from justice, Tennessee Code annotated 4913. On Wednesday, July 12th, the affiant came in contact with the defendant at Maloney Road. The defendant did knowingly or willfully flee from Colorado to Knoxville to avoid prosecution for failure to appear. So here we get the cause of the warrant, failure to appear. NCIC confirmed the defendant is a warrant wanted person. ORI is Jasper, Colorado's Sheriff's Office, SC 2700 NIC. Now then, so it says here that it says Jasper, Colorado. And now we get an extremely detailed explanation about why it says Jasper, Colorado. The bulk of this is there was one typo by the commissioner's clerk that put the word Colorado in there. This is actually South Carolina. There's others identifiers in the document tell you what it is. It really makes the sense of it. First of all, I wish I could show you, but right where it says Jasper County Sheriff's Office, the SC number, that's an originating agency number, and that's what's on the actual NCIC wanted page, which shows the Carolina 027. That's the county number for South Carolina, which shows the area for the person wanted. And of course, the NIC number is great tool. So this particular affidavit, it's inaccurate as to Colorado. Yes, that was inaccurate. What should it have said? It should have said South Carolina. The CO was meant to be county, and when the clerk, apparently what they figure out is the clerk, when they saw Jasper CO, they thought it meant Jasper, Colorado, so they typed it in incorrectly, and then we had the staff member that actually this was released, and a new one was issued immediately after we found the program. Yes, Jasper County instead of Jasper, Colorado. Now it reads correctly. ORI is Jasper County Sheriff's Office, and of course it contains the same NIC number and the South Carolina number. So basically it was a typo, not a giant conspiracy. And then they show the bench warrant from Jasper County, South Carolina. Then they confirm it, blah blah. They show the waiver for extradition, and they show that it's signed by Randy, so Randy signed the waiver for extradition, and that is the end of day 6. Day 7 is also short, so we'll just burn through it. The next day, Randy gets to talk to the guy. I was arrested on the 11th, so I was held for a day without a warrant. You were held until they found out who you were. The only other thing that happens on day 7th is that they interview another person who Randy gave $50,000 to. No actual, I really don't see, well, I guess it's just showing that Randy was spending money like a crazy person. Heather calls Parker Still again to ask him about the warrants, which is a waste of time. Really nothing interesting here. Also on day 7th, the judge allows the UCC documents to be filed into the case because the government doesn't object, and because there were references to the court to the documents throughout the trial. So yeah, that was something. This is a little detail that comes up. People are saying that the UCC documents were not allowed in, but they were actually allowed in as exhibits. Heather files a Rule 29, a Rule 29 motion, or I'm not sure what it's called, for acquittal. The judge rejects it, saying that, among other things, Tucci falsely claimed to be Mr. Bean's attorney to convince them that the funds were legitimate. He also points out to the factualized trust documents provided to Bean. He continues, while there is no evidence of an explicit agreement to commit such a crime, the record does contain examples of Tucci presenting herself as Mr. Bean's lawyer in email in order to legitimize the transaction. There's also evidence that she drafted the documents, audio and email chains, based on a factual, here we go. Regarding Bean's mens rea argument, basically that he didn't intend to commit a crime, basically he rejects the good faith arguments by Randy because, quote, evidence as to the falsity of this belief was readily available to Mr. Bean. Thus, a juror could find that Mr. Bean either intended to deceive or was deliberately ignorant as to the significance of his actions, and thus did not have a good faith belief as to the origins or ownership of the money he took. We talked about that in, I think, day 1 or day 2, that willful ignorance is not essentially nullifies any defense, because if he intentionally avoided looking up information that would show that the TDAs were fraudulent, it ruins, basically he intentionally ignored contradictory evidence. Anyway, he also points out that Bean's actions after the purchase shows intent to profit from a fraudulent scheme, and so he rejects the Rule 29 motion. Heather here continues to not claim that she lost the jury questionnaires. Now, unfortunately, we don't have the closing arguments of Heather or the government's closing arguments. That's not contained in the transcript, so basically screwed. And then end of day 7. Finally, we have day 8. Jury agrees on verdict, guilty to everything. And there's 2 little things here that are relevant. Heather's attorney tries to get her released up until sentencing. We see here the judge explains why he doesn't release her. From the time of the case beginning, she stated that she would comply, but on the other hand, Heather challenged the court's jurisdiction and authority of the government and the legal existence of the federal government as a whole. She has filed documents purporting to void the indictment and ordering the court to release. She has filed altered versions. She filed a declaration February 1st saying that, quote, until the morning of the trial, she believed that this case would not go to trial, given that she did not consent to this proceeding. So Heather thought it was never going to go to trial. That's probably why she was so unprepared and why Randy got screwed, which again shows, how little Heather knows. Anyways, the court is not convinced that Heather would comply with release orders. And finally, her testimony includes that she is from a well-to-do family, extensive foreign travel to China, Hong Kong, Haiti, among other countries, foreign contacts, foreign leaders, foreign agents, foreign business. This alluded to assets that could be held in foreign countries. At the time of her initial appearance, she envisioned being exonerated of the charges, or based on her declaration of today, being convinced that this would never go to trial. However, she has been found guilty of a serious offense and is facing a potentially substantial threat. Thus, the justification for release is no longer present. So he decides to leave her in jail until the sentencing, and that's where it all ends. Now we're just waiting for sentencing on June 12th and June 26th, unless they move it. I hope they don't. Actually, let me throw in one more thing. If you remember, on day 5, Heather said that she was a CPA. Now, this is the Washington State CPA search. It contains every single person who is or was a CPA. Now, if you search for Heather, I sorted by last name. There is no Heather Tucci listed as as ever having been a CPA. It's the same if you search for middle name or last name. Very simply, there is no Heather Ann Tucci draft listed as a CPA in the state of Washington. So when Heather said under oath that she was a CPA, that is a complete lie. Again, if you're one of the people who defends Heather and says that Heather is totally legit, explain why the hell she is lying about being a CPA, or if I'm wrong about that, where is she a CPA?